All right, I have a lot of questions and comments has come up recently about the 90% efficiency furnace. Some people absolutely hate them, some people love them, some people had some concerns after this last storm that we had. So I'm going to cover that. So we're going to talk about them freezing or being installed in an unconditioned attic or unconditioned basement. We're going to talk about them being complex and also longevity. And we're also going to talk about homeowners and DIY. Ooh, scary stuff. So let's first start off with when I did a video a while back comparing 80-90% furnaces, and I also talked about the 90 plus furnace we tore one all the way down. I said specifically that they work well if they have followed the installation guide. Keyword, if they follow the installation guide, they work really well. Most of the time, people are not following the installation guide, and that installation guide leads to all the issues that we're going to be talking about today. The installation guide, it is so incredibly important. Now you have some issues. Now we talk about people with 80% furnaces, they install them, they know how to install them, it seems simple, although there's things that still aren't done right there. And you go to a 90% furnace and there's different methods that have to be used when you install a 90 plus furnace. And if you try to install them the way you did in an 80% furnace, yeah, you're going to have problems with it. And then the homeowner is going to be unhappy, and then everybody's going to be unhappy. So it's not necessarily the furnace itself, it's really the installation. Let's start off first with freezing. People talk about installing these 90 plus furnace in unconditioned attics or unconditioned crawl spaces. So 2 points in that. First point is, really, is it ever a good idea to put the heating and cooling system in a place that's not in the envelope of the house or the conditioned space? Like putting an air conditioner in the attic in Las Vegas, that just seems insane to me. Like, who ever thought about that would be a great idea? Hey, let's put the coldest appliance in the house in the attic. Like, that just doesn't make sense at all. And this is where attic encapsulation comes in. So you encapsulate the whole attic, so the attic is actually part of the envelope or part of the house. It seems like a great idea, but you can't just foam it. You have to go through a whole lot more detail. That's where building science comes in. But either way, the HVAC equipment should really be in a conditioned space. Same thing if it's going to be under the house, in the basement area. You should really talk about encapsulation. You can encapsulate the crawl space. There's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way. There's many wrong ways of doing it that can cause bigger issues. But really, let's think about the HVAC equipment. Overall, it's going to operate and perform better in the conditioned space. All of our equipment now has computers in it, very expensive motors in it, and these components are being left to the extreme hot and the extreme cold. It's just not a positive way for them to be installed. Now we've covered that. Ideally, it should be in a conditioned space on any equipment, including your ductworks for that matter. But can you install it in an unconditioned attic or an unconditioned basement or floor space under a house? Yes, you can, and they will work right if you follow the installation manual. So much information on installation manual. So a 90 plus furnace, we know that it has condensate for the flue pipe, and it's got condensate from the drain side of it. If you read the installation manual, I'll just give you one example from one manufacturer. And so if it's going to be installed in an area below 32 degrees, you have to install freeze protection. In other words, the drain line has to be wrapped with heating tape. That tape that keeps the pipe warm so that the drain can continuously drain. You must also have the flue pipe. If it's going to be ran through a space, it's going to be below 32 degrees, that it needs to be insulated. You must insulate that pipe. And in one particular manual, it says if that condition is going to be below 20 degrees, you must also have heat tape under the insulation that's going to be around that pipe. So if people would read the installation manual, wow, a lot of information there. So I see all the time where they install this in an unconditioned attic and nobody does anything about controlling the freezing of the drain lines or the flue pipe. And then people say, well, I've done this way for 20 years and never had an issue. Well, then you get a winter storm come through and all of a sudden, yeah, it's an issue. It's a big problem. And then people, what do? They blame the furnace. Oh, that stupid furnace. How about if we read the installation manual and maybe follow some of those rules? It would solve a lot of them, not all the problems, but it would solve an awful lot of those problems. So again, the installation manual is so important. It actually says it prefers that drain line to be ran in conditioned space. Really, a 90% furnace should never have its drain line ran outside anyways. Now, there's people that argue about code, but if you really look at the code, there's always exceptions, and code's difficult to read. I give you that. I definitely say code's difficult to read, but some people just want to say you can't put the drain, the condensate drain in a drain line, and that's really haven't yet seen that to be true. We want to make sure that drain line is not going to freeze. So if we run that drain line outside, yeah, it's going to freeze up. It's going to be an issue. So we want to make sure that we drain it to a proper place. It's not going to be an issue. And if we do that, it's going to be fine. Now, there are some exceptions to the rules. Now, there's some places that they had where it was like minus 30 degrees. Now, when I'm talking about temperature, I'm not talking about wind chill. Wind chill is for people. When we talk about HVAC equipment, wind chill does not apply. We talk about stack effect and wind separately and temperature separately. So we talk about places that's like minus 30. Your exhaust, that could definitely be an issue. It could possibly be an issue. Another big factor about these furnaces is where that exhaust comes through. Every manufacturer I've seen says do not put any kind of screen or covering on that exhaust pipe, and then you'll get people, homeowners especially, that go and put those covers on there, and that cover allows the condensate to build up and allows it to freeze, and then the pipe freezes up and you have a big issue. So there shouldn't be any kind of a cover on there. Also, the length, how far that pipe comes out, there's restrictions on there in the installation manual, because that pipe comes out of the house too far, it's more likely to freeze. It's going to be much more of an issue. And another factor is where it's going to be. Now, we've seen houses that were completely covered in snow. Like at that point, you just have to do some maintenance at that point. When you end up with snow covering the exhaust, you're going to have to clean that off. You're going to have to clean that up so that it can get the exhaust out and breathe the air in. So some of that stuff is just going to be with weather patterns. Which side of the house should you put the exhaust on? Well, you can't just put it anywhere you want. Sometimes the furnace is on the back side, and that's where your snow builds up. So you have to maybe think about putting in something that catch the snow. I know when I drove through Wyoming, they had these wooden slats that would catch the snow so it wouldn't build up on the roads or on the fence lines. There's always a solution for it, but just simply saying it's junk, we got to look at the bigger picture. So the biggest issue with them freezing up is following installation manual. I mean, it really comes down simple to that. And then yes, there are going to be exceptions such as snow buildup and extreme weather conditions. All right, so we got that one covered. Let's move on to the next one. People talk about them having issues, and there was somebody on one of the boards that said, we've replaced 4 of these inducer fan motors, 4 of these motors, and now I'm going back to replace it a 5th time. Well, the customer said, you know what, don't bother coming back out here. We're going to have another company come out. Somebody else came out, said the same thing. Then the third person that came out said, hey, the flue pipe is actually sloping away from the inducer motor. And what was happening was condensation was building up in the flue pipe and it was acting as a trap, and then the furnace wasn't working right and ended up burning out the inducer fan motor. So again, it goes back to that installation manual. Now let's talk about the complexity of an 80% versus 90% furnace. Most people that hate the 90% furnace, oh, there's too much technology in there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go back to the basics of an 80% furnace and a 90% furnace. They have the same components. The difference is the inducer fan motor is going to be made of plastic instead of metal. But you still have the inducer fan motor, you still have the igniter, you still have flame sensors, you still have all those same components, except now our flue pipe is going to be plastic instead of being metal. And the biggest thing is we're going to have an air intake coming from outside. So there's going to be some differences there, but the heat exchanger is still a metal heat exchanger. With a 90% furnace, you have 2 heat exchangers. But there's still a heat exchanger. You still have fire coming in. The difference is the firebox is enclosed, but all your components are the same. Now let's talk about 2-stage. You can have a 2-stage 80% furnace and a 2-stage condensing furnace. So those 2 stages does add more complexity, but you still have 2 stages with an 80 and a 2-stage for a 90. It being a 2-stage doesn't make it more energy efficient. It being a 2-stage allows it to be more comfortable. We can use low fire and have longer run time so the house temperature doesn't swing as bad. So that's the benefit of the 2-stage, not so much that it's making it any more efficient, because it's really not. And they make some single-stage 90% of furnaces that work just like an 80% furnace if you install it correctly. So there's really not any more parts. You still have control boards, you still have inducer fan motors, you still have all those same components. Now let's get into the big difference is modulating furnaces. This is where your technology, your cost of your parts, and your complexity of diagnosing them really jump. When you get to a modulating furnace, you have a variable speed inducer fan motor, you have a gas valve that fully variable opens and closes, you have a variable for your pressure switches. Now we've changed from a 2-stage furnace to a variable speed furnace. These cost a lot more. The parts aren't readily available as much. They're more difficult to diagnose. And yes, they can be more of an issue. But it's not because it's a 90% furnace that makes it complicated. It's because it's a variable modulating furnace. That's what makes it more complicated. And it's the modulation factor that's really the issue. So you can get a simple, plain 90% furnace. It's pretty easy to work on if you understand how furnaces work. And it works really well. You get into the modulation side, yeah, you're going to have to know more. You have to really understand what's happening. You have to make sure it's set up correctly. There's a lot more steps involved with that, but they still typically work. Now, my concern with that is getting the parts. If you have a modulating furnace and you have to get that inducer fan motor to be replaced, yeah, it's going to cost a lot more because it's modulating, and it's probably going to be more difficult to get because they got to have it shipped somewhere. So Plastic isn't going to keep that on their shelf. So there is a little bit of an issue with that, but it's not because it's a 90% furnace. It's because it's modulating. Now, people like to compare an 80% furnace to the 90% furnace and say it's only 10% different. Well, a lot of them now, most all of them are 95%, even 98%. So you're looking at 15 to 18% more efficient. Now, will that pay for itself? Down south, maybe, maybe not. But up north, to talk about using it most of the year, it could very well pay for itself. You're talking about a lot of difference in fuel. In the old days, we had 50% furnaces, 50 and 60% furnaces, and we went from there to 80. So 60, 70, 80, 20% increase. It was a big difference. And now we have from 80% furnace to 90% furnaces. So there is going to be, a little bit of efficiency difference there. Will it pay for itself? I don't know. I don't know what your fuel rate is, how much fuel you're using, what your temperature set at. There's a lot of variables in that. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but there is some savings in that. Now, you're never going to pay back those savings by going with the 90% furnace. How long it would take to pay back versus the cost, it's probably unlikely. More the fact is that, hey, your old one burned out and you got to replace it. The cost difference between a new 80% furnace and a new 90% furnace may not be that much more, may save you a lot more. So that's where we're talking about comparing the differences. And let's talk about that technology a little bit more. A lot of people were really mad. They loved when they had standing pilot furnaces, and they were mad when they went to 80% furnaces because there's a huge technology difference between a standing pilot furnace and an 80% furnace. You have that standing pilot, you didn't have inducer fan motors, you didn't have all those extra safeties and pressure switches, no control boards. They were simple. So a lot of people were very upset when we went to an 80% furnace. And now, again, we're going from 80 to 90s and then modulating. People get very upset about the technology change. The thing is that technology is going to continuously change. Like, it's not going to stop. And then you have government coming in, they're going to say, hey, we're going to mandate these changes. I have yet to see anybody be able to stop these mandates unless they own a multi-million-dollar corporation. They have lots of money to spend on lobbyists. But somebody like me, I'm not going to be able to make those lobbyists change or any change in the government. What I can do is adapt to what's coming out. When I started out, we didn't even have cell phones. We actually had radios we had to use. And now I have my cell phone, tons of information. It's like a computer right here. And yeah, it costs a whole lot more. And yeah, it's more expensive when that screen breaks, having to have the screen done, putting case on it, making sure that I protect it. I have to charge the battery all the time. There's lots of negatives about this, but there's also a lot of positives. And really, it doesn't really matter because everybody has phones now. This is the way that the world works. So even though I'm not a big fan of the modulating furnaces, it's where we're going. I mean, more and more people are going there. Manufacturers are going there. So we simply have to learn about it. Now let's talk a little bit about DIY. Let's talk a little bit DIY. Now, I know there's a lot of people DIY that watch the videos. I'm not promoting people to install their own furnaces. I am not promoting that at all. What I do want to say is I've seen a lot of DIY people that installed furnaces better than a professional company. Yeah, that's incredible. So you get people that care enough to read the manual and install a furnace per code, per the manual, do better installations than actual companies. Now, that's great that homeowners can do that. That's awesome. But what really worries me is, why is a homeowner installing a furnace better than a professional? That tells us that we have a lot of work to do on the professional side. We need to be out there reading and knowing what's in those installation manuals. When a customer can read that installation manual and tell you what you're not doing right, as a professional, we failed. We have definitely failed at that point. And a customer, homeowner, maybe they want a modulating furnace and you're trying to talk them out of it, then maybe you should recommend them go to another company. Because if a customer wants that modulating furnace, that technology, then let's understand it and know how to install it. And if we're so afraid of it, then we shouldn't be installing that. But we shouldn't also take that away from the customer and talk them out of what that they want. We can say, hey, here's the pros and cons. Modulating furnace will be more expensive parts, blah, 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 blah. But to talk a customer out of it is another issue. So I'm appalled that some of the installations from professional companies are so bad. I'm really shocked at how many professional companies are so against the technology change. They want them to be extremely simple to work on. And I understand that. I got a 1999 Toyota Tacoma with a manual transmission, manual gearbox, manual windows, and in the back I still have my 1978 Ford that was manual everything. So I have an appreciation for the simplicity of things. I'm not against that. But as a professional in our career, the technology changes. And as professionals, we learn how to work on that stuff. If it was simple for a homeowner, to anybody to fix, a homeowner could fix their own equipment. I mean, it's not hard to clean a flame sensor and replace a hot service igniter. Why do they need us to come out to work on that simple equipment? They should be relying on us to understand and know that technology, that new technology, how to diagnose that condensing furnace. Does the homeowner have the instrumentation and the tools and manometers to diagnose that equipment? Yeah, unlikely. And it's going to cost them more to buy those tools than the service call is going to be. On the professional side, that's where we have the knowledge, the skills, and the tools to be able to make that happen. So the fight against technology really isn't one that seems relevant to me. Just we got to learn about it. Another scary thing is so many people are against being able to do things the right way. People are against clocking the gas meter and doing combustion analysis. They weren't doing combustion analysis on 80% furnaces. And I see heat exchangers die all the time because they weren't set up correctly. They're either being overfired or underfired, and all they do is set the gas pressure. Well, I set the gas pressure, it's good. They're not realizing that the gas quantity changes across the country, and they're not clocking the meter, so they have no clue how much gas they're putting into that furnace. They just set the gas pressure because that's what Bob told them 20 years ago. Every installation manual has in there about clocking the gas meter, but yet people aren't doing it because, well, we don't need to. I've never had a problem, but yet they have heat exchangers fail all the time. Heat exchanger shouldn't fail. It's failing because bad ductwork. It's failing because of no combustion analysis. It wasn't ever set up right from the beginning. So really, the homeowner shouldn't be able to install this equipment because we should be doing combustion analysis, clocking the gas meter, all those things that people complain about doing. That's what we're supposed to do because we're the professionals. We're not just selling equipment and seeing who can put it in the cheapest and the easiest as possible. We should be doing it the best as possible with the best quality and proving it. Starting it up with all the recordings, having that combustion analysis when you start that system up, what the amps are doing, everything about that furnace so we can compare it through the life of that system. Knowing what the static pressure is. You can sell a new furnace, you slap it in that same horrible duct system, it's not going to work very well. And they're going to have replacement motors. These motors are expensive now. Back in the day, motors used to be like $30 my cost, we go on. But now my cost of some of these motors are $800, even $1,000. I can't imagine what the cost for the homeowner is going to be. It's going to be insane. The better solution is, hey, let's fix a ductwork issue so that motor's not burning out. Let's put a surge protector on there. I'm not getting those surges. Let's encapsulate that attic and install that unit in the attic to where that furnace is going to be in a conditioned space where it's not going to be burning out all the time. There's always going to be solutions for this. And yeah, it requires some change. It requires us learning. And you don't have to I don't like modulating furnaces, but guess what? I know how to diagnose them. I know how to work on them. I know how to install them correctly. I know how to fix them. I know how to order parts from it. The thing I hate the most is being able to tell the customer, hey, you're going to have to wait 3 or 4 days for the part to come in. That's like the worst part. And then sometimes the cost on it. So I get that. But a condensing furnace, they're quite simple. They work simple. If it would just follow the installation guide, we'd actually be commissioning them, doing combustion analysis, actually checking the static pressure. And if you're against doing all that stuff, then I don't know, maybe it's time to either open mindset, learn something new, or maybe it's time to retire. I had a 1978 Ford pickup that had a carburetor. And my mechanic friend was always telling me, never get fuel injection. Fuel injection's the devil. It won't work right. Computer's controlling your car. Well, he ended up retiring in the early 90s because there was so much fuel injection out by that point. And then by the time before he died, he was driving a fuel injection vehicle with power windows. Oh my gosh. I think it even had power seats. Like, the devil won him over. So, the technology, you don't have to like it. You don't have to work on it. But the technology is changing, and the biggest thing is we got to change our methods to adapt. We also got to be looking at the home. We can't just put this high efficiency 90% furnace and think that we're solving all the problems. We have to look at the home. Air sealing, blower door test. We got to seal up the home and then do a correct heat load calculation to make sure we're putting in the right size furnace. All of this plays a difference. A customer is unlikely to be able to do a heat load calculation. And no, it's not square foot per ton. If it's square foot per ton, a customer could do that. We should be the professionals understanding how to do a heat load calculation. We should be the professionals doing a blower door test. We should be the professionals using manual D to size the duct systems. We should be the professionals understanding how to install that flue pipe to where it's going to be insulated, has the little heat strip in it if it's going to be below 20. How that we're installing all of these systems to where it's going to last a long time. The customer is going to get a quality system, and they're going to be happy and comfortable with it. And I have no issues with charging for our skill. If a homeowner wants something done cheap, then let them do it themselves. I don't feel a homeowner should make any AC company do stuff cheaper. So people say, well, the homeowner just wants it cheap. Well, cool. Let the homeowner do it themselves. I do my stuff myself all the time. I work on my own car. I work on my own electrical at the house. Like all the stuff I do it myself. I'm essentially a DIY in everything outside of HVAC. I'm the person that fixes it all. I fix it mainly because I want to have the quality done. I never want to hear a homeowner complaining about how much it costs to have quality work done on their furnace. They're going to pay for that skill. That's where we come in. On the other hand, as professionals, we have to be doing it the right way. We have to be having the tools, have the knowledge, have the skills, continuously go to training so that we're providing those professional skills to the homeowner. There's a big difference in that. So if a homeowner wants something done cheap, by all means, do it yourself. It's their home, their life, their risk. They take that risk on. When they call us the professional, we shouldn't be worried about how can we do this cheaper. We should be thinking, how can we do this better? How can we be the best company? How can we have the fewest callbacks? How can we make sure this furnace is going to last the longest possible? All the bells and whistles, regardless, we're installing it the best. So I know, kind of off track here. That's my spill on 90 plus furnaces. My biggest aggravation when I go to a 90 plus furnace that's not working right is seeing that it hasn't been installed right. And that's my absolute biggest complaint. And the biggest thing is open mindset. Are you willing to learn about these furnaces? Then take some classes for it. Take some classes from the manufacturer and read the installation manual. There's so much free information right there. RTL Film, read the fabulous manual. Sorry, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this from homeowners, from companies, professionals, but you know, it's my opinion. I feel it's the truth. So biggest thing is never stop learning, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next video.